suicide bombers caused carnage in the Afghan capital, and an American double agent killed 7 of CIA's finest.
This istishhadi attack will be the first of the revenge operation.
And al-Qaeda bring the fear of terror back to American skies. Osama bin Laden once again taunts the United States.
Our attacks will continue as long as you support Israel.
With its forces condemned as invaders. From Baghdad to Kabul, President Obama is under pressure to open a third front in the war on terror.
We see global implications from the war in Yemen.
So as its military hardware bring yet more death and destruction to Yemen, what are the regional alternatives to America's global war? This is Empire. Hello and welcome to Empire. I am Marwan Bishara. For the past year, Empire has set out to examine forensically and dispassionately the phenomenon that is al-Qaeda, and above all, its ability to provoke the world's only superpower to treat it as a military equal. As we have shown, despite 8 years of wars, trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of dead, Washington seems either in denial or no closer to understanding what really motivates al-Qaeda militants, its affiliates, or sympathizers, let alone how best to deal with them.
We had not developed that strategy. I don't believe that strategy still exists.
There is no al-Qaeda in Afghanistan.
What recruits a suicide attacker better than anything else is foreign occupation.
The war on terror has been a catastrophe.
Since our last program, an escalation of bloodshed in Afghanistan and Pakistan, including synchronized suicide attacks striking at the heart of Kabul, and attacks on American soldiers and spies have shaken Washington's military establishment and intelligence community. First, an Arab-American military psychiatrist shot dead 13 fellow soldiers and wounded 30 more at a military camp in America's heartland. Then on Christmas Day, a middle-class Nigerian student tried to blow an American passenger plane out of the skies over Detroit. He might have failed to blow a hole in the plane, but he blew a greater hole in President Obama's entire counterterrorism strategy. Then, at the close of the year, an American intelligence asset, a Jordanian doctor, killed 7 CIA officers at a US military camp in Afghanistan, dealing a huge blow to American intelligence capabilities.
This istishhadi attack will be the first of the revenge operations against the Americans and their drone teams.
A double agent, a wealthy student, and a full-fledged US soldier, none of them matched America's prototype of a terrorist. Neither did their motives. In the process, al-Qaeda in Yemen managed to grab Washington's attention for its ties to at least one of the attacks.
We carry bombs for God's enemies.
Prompting a knee-jerk reaction which repeats, unlikely escalates, an already failed strategy.
We will continue to use every element of our national power to disrupt, to dismantle, and defeat the violent extremists who threaten us, whether they are from Afghanistan or Pakistan, Yemen, or Somalia.
Obama sent General Petraeus to Sana'a to coerce Yemen to escalate the war on al-Qaeda and pledged to double American military aid to President Saleh's regime. Despite clear evidence that such attacks frequently murder the innocent and only strengthen hostility to America.
The sons of Yemen in the government and the public should refuse intervention in all its forms and manifestations.
Instead of crushing al-Qaeda, Washington has walked right into its trap, deploying its soldiers to Muslim lands, propping up repressive regimes across the Middle East, and in the process, becoming the designated enemy of the Muslim world. Joining me in the studio to discuss the war on terror from Arab and Muslim perspective is Professor Hassan Nafa of Cairo University, Chairman of the Political Science Department, and Sumaya Ghannouchi, activist, researcher, and a freelance journalist. Welcome to Empire.
Thank you.
Dr. Nafa, Hassan, it seems that after 8 years, the American military project has failed. And the proof is al-Qaeda leaders are still proliferating all over the region. What is your explanation for that?
Well, that the policy has been used was not the proper one. The target is not very clear. We don't know exactly who the United States is fighting. Is it al-Qaeda? Is it Taliban? Is it Saddam Hussein? Or is it any organization that stands against the policy of the United States? So you cannot fight terrorist groups by traditional war.
So you're talking, for example, the war in Iraq?
The war in Iraq,
the war in Afghanistan?
The war in Afghanistan. The war in Iraq, for example, nobody understands exactly what is the link between this war and terrorism and al-Qaeda, because we know that the ideology of Ba'ath has nothing to do with the ideology of al-Qaeda.
In fact, probably Saddam Hussein was very much against that type of organization of al-Qaeda.
From ideological perspective, from every stand, as a matter of fact. And it was a force against Iran. Now, the United States is trying to argue that Iran is the threat. And when you destroy Iraq, it means that you are giving a very nice gift to
Iran, yet another adversary.
Exactly, which is another adversary and perceived as an adversary. So you cannot win a war against the guerrilla with traditional. So it will going on for much longer time, and I don't think that the United States will win. It will not be defeated militarily, but it will not achieve its objectives.
I think the lesson of the war on terror and its failure is that military force on its own cannot guarantee success and cannot guarantee security. I think the war on terror has failed largely because of this excessive reliance on military force, on military interventions, on invasions, on preemptive strikes, and because of the kind of language used, a discourse of confrontation which served to mobilize the whole Muslim world, the whole Arab world.
Good versus evil.
Absolutely.
You're either with us or
either
with the
terrorists. And when Bush said to the world, you're either with us or against us, the world said the latter, thank you very much. Yeah. And so that's largely the reason why the war on terror failed. I think it also failed for another reason, because the United States, which spearheads this war on terror, lacks credibility in the eyes of the people of the region.
Why is that?
Largely because of its role in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, because the United States is seen as giving unconditional support for Israel in its wars of aggression, in its occupations.
So do you think, for example, the audio tape of Osama bin Laden about how the people of Palestine, or the people in Gaza for that matter, are safe, Americans will not be safe, you think that plays into the hands of his affiliates and hence against America's project in the region?
Well, he is clearly trying to increase his legitimacy and by trying to take ownership of the Palestinian-Israeli, the Palestinian plight, the struggle for the liberation of Palestine. But people, I think, see clearly between national liberation movements like Hamas and like Hezbollah and al-Qaeda, whose agenda is more globalized. Going back to the war on terror, I think it also failed, and the United States also lacks credibility in the eyes of the people of the region because of its support, perceived support, and in fact active support for the existing status quo. Its hindrance of democratic change in the region.
So it's support for autocratic leaders? For
autocratic leaders who have gone well past their sell-by date and still stagger on for no reason other than the support, outside support, the support of the United States. And all this has been a recipe for failure. And I think if you've done any cooking, you know that if you use foul ingredients, bad ingredients, you can only get a bad product.
I don't know how good of a cook you are, Hassan, but certainly Ms. Ghannouchi raised 2 points that I think are definitely worth our discussion today. The first one is about the relationship between resistance movements, Islamist resistance movement in the Arab world, and al-Qaeda. If you look at the record over the last several months and years, it seems al-Qaeda, 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 al-Qaeda Al-Qaeda and Hamas, Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah in Lebanon, Al-Qaeda and the Iraqi resistance have been confronting one another even in the battlefield and have been killing of one another. So why couldn't the Arab world or the Muslim world distinguish or make it clear to the rest of the world that they are not all one and the same?
Well, in the mind of the people in the region, the United States is fighting resistance because it is resistance, not because it is Islamic or Islamist at all. We have to look what was the relationship between the United States and Gamal Abdel Nasser, for example, or Arab nationalists when they were leading the battle in the field. We remember why the United States withdrew the financing of the High Dam, for example, and so on. We understand the kind of relationship between the United States and Israel, and that doesn't help at all. And look, until now, the sole superpower, the United States, could not impose to Israel to freeze its settlement. So it is not only the perception of the United States, it is against the Arab interest. It is not. Now, the Islamists are leading the resistance, and they are not all the same, because you cannot assimilate. Al-Qaeda is different from Taliban even. It is different from Hezbollah, it is different from Hamas. Some are Shiite, some are Sunnis, and so on. But the United States seems to be confusing all this.
There is willful confusion, I think. I think it's the result of a willful confusion by the United States and its allies, trying to cast everyone into this vague category called Islamism, called extremism. And you know the labels here change all the time. And today's moderate may have been yesterday's extremist, and yesterday's extremist might be tomorrow's moderate.
Such as President al-Ahmar.
Yes, I mean there are many. And now, I mean, it's intriguing that we're hearing talk of moderates within the Taliban, nothing less. And I wouldn't be surprised to hear of a dialogue with moderates from al-Qaeda. I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood, for instance, is dismissed as extremist, whereas we're hearing of moderates within the Taliban. And another example, for instance, is the Kurds. The Kurds in Iraq are lovable allies and as such moderate, whereas those a few kilometers away in Turkey are extremist, and likewise Shia in Iraq, because their allies and friends are moderates, whereas a few kilometers away the Shia in Iran are, fearsome extremists. And in its confrontation with these fearsome Shia, the Iranians, the United States has created this so-called axis of moderates, which includes none other than Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan. So it's language games which are being played, and we have to be very careful of these labels, which are erratic, not fixed, and not neutral or innocent.
Well, these linguistic acrobatics, Dr. Nafa, perhaps are not revealing the real picture. It's clear to me, at least, that the common enemy for al-Qaeda and the United States is the Islamist resistance movement in the Arab world, which is kind of paradoxical, isn't it?
Very paradoxical, but we are not sure in the Arab and Muslim world that the United States is really focusing on what's so-called terror. It has a hidden agenda, because it has, especially the new cons, they have their own agenda of hegemony all over the world, and they're trying to put all the Muslim world as if it is the enemy that is replacing the former Soviet Union. The United States need an enemy to tackle, but it is behind this, there is a scheme.
What about President Obama? He did make 3 elaborate speeches towards the Muslim world, and he did try to extend the hand for those who unclench their fist. Do you think that's just rhetoric, or do you think there is a policy behind that?
I will not say that there is a policy. I do believe that Obama, and I attended his speech at Cairo University, and it was fantastically well received. But we tested Obama for a year now, and it is very much clear that there is a huge gap between the rhetoric and the policy on the ground, and we tested it very specifically vis-à-vis Israel. He couldn't say to Netanyahu, no, you have to freeze the settlement, for example. And this is one, could you imagine that the superpower could not say to Israel, to one of its clients, to just freeze the land, even if it is perceived as disputed land,
Which you
and
think
not occupied
now
land.
Pressure is being exerted on the Palestinians.
On the moderate and on Mahmoud Abbas. And Mahmoud Abbas
which you think plays to the hands of so-called extremists and plays to the hands of those who are...
Yeah, you're right, Dr. Dafa. I mean, Obama does give beautiful speeches, but if he had been an actor, that would have been enough. But he's not, he's a politician, and whether or not he does commit himself to change or he does realize change will be judged by 3 tests, which are the pillars of American policy in the Middle East, by support for Israel, by attempts to preserve the status quo, and of course the other pillar is guaranteeing the safe and cheap flow of oil. And from what we see, Obama hasn't moved an inch from these pillars.
In the process, however, al-Qaeda affiliates are proliferating in the Arab and the Muslim world. Instead of Afghanistan and Iraq, they're moving to Yemen, to the Horn of Africa, and now perhaps to Mauritania. Yes. And Tim Tate looks at al-Qaeda's latest incarnation in Mauritania.
In the vast desert expanses between Mali, Algeria and Mauritania, al-Qaeda has a new stronghold. An offshoot of North Africa's al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb now proclaims this area to be the Sahara Emirate. This amateur video shows its fighters living in caves, drinking from streams, and living off the land. The only things they have in abundance are arms, guns, bombs, and rocket-propelled grenades. And their aim?
Thanks to God, the most compassionate, who made it our duty to fight the infidels and those who went back on their beliefs.
It's estimated that al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb now has 700 fighters in North Africa. Since its emergence in 2006, it has carried out more than 20 attacks and killed around 150 people. And they're suspected of being behind the recent abductions of Europeans. The US, worried by such threats, created the Trans-Sahara Counter-Terrorism Partnership and dispenses military aid throughout the region. Whilst this aid is welcomed by the Mauritanian and Malian regimes, US meddling risks provoking a backlash and playing right into al-Qaeda's narrative. With small splinter groups like this popping up in the most unlikely and inhospitable locations, the US will need a new strategy for combating al-Qaeda, or it will prove to be a very long war.
Predictably, Dr. Nafa Hassan, the American response to such a new basis of al-Qaeda in the Horn of Africa and in the sub-Saharan Africa in general was military support to the Mauritanian government, military support to the Mali government, on the footsteps of more of the same military supports into various countries like Yemen, like Afghanistan, like Iraq, and so on and so forth. Once again, it's the question of supporting autocratic leaders. There's always this first instinct, put out more hardware and support autocratic leaders. Is that backfiring?
Absolutely, absolutely. Once you are dragged in this game that you have to support the despotic regimes, you have more anger and more conducive environment to create more terrorists. And this, I think, this has to compel the United States to change absolutely its strategy, because it is first a war of attrition, and if they are dragged to fight everywhere.
So in the end of the day, the United States, Ms. Hanouchi, is supporting autocratic leaders that oppress their people, that produce extremists.
Absolutely. There seems to be a correlation between despotism, the climate of political closure and deadlock, and the growth of al-Qaeda. And we can see this, in countries like Turkey, for instance, where there is an open democratic environment, al-Qaeda's presence not only is almost non-existent, it's very weak. So there is a correlation between the two. Another, we're talking about the growth of al-Qaeda in countries like Yemen. Now al-Qaeda is moving even closer to oil, the sources of oil. Whenever the United States has intervened militarily, it has created a climate of chaos, political chaos, because it has destroyed existing structures and then found that it is quite incapable
of
rebuilding them. Yes,
provides safe haven for the likes of al-Qaeda, like Iraq, like Afghanistan.
No, in Iraq, al-Qaeda wasn't even there.
Until after the war.
2003, until the Americans moved in, and then al-Qaeda became a central player, a very active player in Iraqi political life. And in Afghanistan, talking about Afghanistan, yes, al-Qaeda was present in Afghanistan, but it was a shadowy small group hiding in the caves and mountains of the country. And after the invasion and occupation, now al-Qaeda is an active player and has active presence throughout Afghanistan. And recent reports suggest that it controls most provinces in Afghanistan. And recently there was fighting in Kabul, in the capital itself. So there is a correlation between the two. You have American military intervention, then you have active, strong presence for al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda thrives in climates of chaos. Whenever there is chaos, there is a strong presence of al-Qaeda.
So, Dr. Nafa, al-Qaeda and the Pentagon are feeding into one another.
Absolutely. And not only this, I think, and look, try to study it carefully, you will see that once the military intervention started by the United States, it contributed to a more failing state. They weaken the regime, they weaken the state, and you have more and more state failures which will not be able at all to face the opposition, including the terrorist groups. So this is a strategy of al-Qaeda and the extremism group, dragging the United States, fighting traditional war, making a chaotic situation, and in the wave of a failing state, you have much more conducive.
So what do you think? Is it more of al-Qaeda trapping America into coming to the region to fight unpopular wars, or is it that the Pentagon is using al-Qaeda as an excuse to come in and dominate in the Middle East?
Both. I think there has been a misassessment from the first beginning. If you have a strategy, a hegemonic strategy all over the world, because you have contradiction not only with the Arab and the Muslim world, you have the United States have problems with the rest of the world, as a matter of fact. Look at the international system, how it works, and look the position of the United States vis-a-vis the International Criminal Court, for example. They don't want to be part of it. Look to the environment issues and so on. You have most of the people in the world are against, but they try to create a fear of the Islamism in the world, but behind that they had already a strategy for hegemony. But I think maybe the Pentagon thought at first that it is easy to get rid of, to get the whole world mobilized toward this, and once they can control this area, which is the Arab Muslim area, which is very rich in oil and so on, it will be they will be in a position to control China, to dominate the international system and so on. But this is failing as a matter of fact. This is exactly failing.
So now they have to leave Iraq. Things are not going very well in Afghanistan. Pakistan is facing huge instability problems. And now we're talking about Yemen, certainly the Arabian Peninsula, Somalia. This is really not working.
But I think it's rather naive to say that al-Qaeda has trapped the United States into a war, because al-Qaeda itself is only, I don't believe it has, it can dictate, or it has dictated American strategy. American policies are shaped and dictated by wider strategies. Great powers policies, international policies are shaped by wider strategies, which are not created at the spur of the moment or as a result of emotional reactions, but by military experts and strategists and political experts as well. Al-Qaeda itself, we have to remember, is only an explosion of anger, an emotional reaction at American policies in the region. And the trouble is that the United States is handing Al-Qaeda its raison d'être. It's handing Al-Qaeda a moral justification and an ability to recruit more and more disillusioned and angry young men.
Well, it seems we have a new front for everything you've just mentioned.
Oh, yes.
And it's called Yemen.
Oh, because
this is the new
keeps
front.
Reproducing these fronts.
That's right.
Yes.
A new mutation of Iraq and Afghanistan seems to be Yemen. When we come back, we're going to discuss the new mutations of al-Qaeda in Yemen. And we're going to be speaking to leading opposition figure, Sheikh Hamid al-Ahmar, right when we come back. Welcome back. Each time you think you've seen the back of General Petraeus in one part of the Muslim world, His face appears on another. His latest stopover was in Yemen, where the suicide bomber Abdul Muttalib was trained and where bin Laden's family originated. With a disproportional high number of al-Qaeda's militants, Yemen is dangerously situated halfway between war-ridden Somalia and Afghanistan, and all too close to Islam's holiest sites in Saudi Arabia. With its northern regions engulfed by war and southern parts fighting for secession, Yemen's tribal system and rugged nature, like Afghanistan, makes it a desired safe haven for al-Qaeda affiliates, just as its proximity to major sea lanes and most of the world's oil reserves render it of strategic importance to the United States. To discuss Yemen in the context of Washington's war on al-Qaeda, I am also joined from Sana'a by opposition leader and parliament member Sheikh Hamid al-Ahmar. But first, Mohammed Val reports on Yemen's state of crisis.
Yemen is back on the world's radar.
We carry bombs for God's enemies.
And President Obama is under pressure to open a third front in America's self-declared war on terror.
Iraq was yesterday's war. Afghanistan is today's war. Now, Yemen will be tomorrow's war.
But on the ground in Yemen, it's quickly clear that America may be about to repeat the mistakes of Afghanistan and Iraq, and to turn the specter of al-Qaeda in Yemen into a self-fulfilling reality.
Al-Qaeda is one of the least problems of Yemen.
We're not talking about al-Qaeda controlling the Yemeni state in any way.
American policy helps al-Qaeda in its recruitment.
Yemen may be a political backwater, but it's at the strategic heart of the Middle East. It shares a border with Saudi Arabia and is surrounded by some of the most volatile lands in the region. But Yemen today is a failing state, fighting two internal insurgencies, a secessionist movement in the south and an armed uprising in the north. Both, according to the Yemeni government, are being infiltrated by al-Qaeda.
Yemen represents a sacred cause in al-Qaeda's ideology. According to this ideology, al-Qaeda believes that Yemen can bring together 12,000 fighters at Abayan of Aden, to the south of the country, to liberate Palestine.
Al-Qaeda has history in Yemen. In October 2000, it bombed the USS Cole in Aden Harbor, killing 17 American sailors. In July 2007, it murdered 7 Spanish tourists in the eastern province of Ma'rib. And in September 2008, it sent suicide bombers to attack the US embassy in Sana'a. 16 people died. But President Saleh's regime also has a lengthy history of cutting covert deals with Osama bin Laden's fighters to ensure they help defeat his enemies.
He has helped to play into the notion that the Yemeni government turned a blind eye to the activities of al-Qaeda inside Yemen's borders.
That blind eye even extends to former Guantanamo Bay inmates who escaped from Yemeni prisons. Yet, despite clear evidence that President Saleh is as much the problem as the solution, Washington continues to prop him up with arms and cash he needs to buy loyalty from Yemen's influential tribal leaders. But buying loyalty has mired Yemen in endemic corruption and wholesale poverty.
55% of Yemenis live in absolute poverty. That means on less than $2 or $1 a day. A third of the Yemeni population is malnourished. This is the deep, structural socio and economic problem, pushing the country to the brink of collapse.
Saleh's dismal record of corruption, economic mismanagement, and dependence on Western funds has helped fuel the secessionist movement in the south and an intractable civil war with the Houthi rebels in the north. Under pressure from Washington and backed by American military hardware, Yemen's army has now escalated attacks on al-Qaeda bases, despite warnings that this will make President Saleh's regime even more vulnerable.
I think the American involvement is there, and the people of the region know the Americans are there. It's a major factor in recruitment to al-Qaeda and anger of those who don't even support al-Qaeda.
There is no problem between you and us. The problem is between us and America and its agents.
Sheikh Hamid al-Ahmar, you are a businessman, you are a legislator, you are an opposition leader and a tribal leader. Tell me, do you agree with U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton that Yemen is a threat to regional stability and to global security?
I think the real threat is the continue of the partnership between the Yemeni regime and the United States. Terror in Yemen is a new thing to our society. It is refused by us, refused by parties, refused by tribes, refused by Yemeni people. I tell you that if our regime was honest, he could easily, from the beginning, with the real partnership with the Yemeni society and the components of the Yemeni political parties, he could have gone over this problem from the beginning. I myself remember that from the very beginning of the presence of al-Qaeda in Yemen, I've met with the President Saleh. I've advised him that he should collect everybody to fight terror in Yemen. He should make some legislations which make any link between these activities and any person as a crime, which the Yemeni law would call it a crime. He didn't take this advice because maybe he has his own agenda.
What is his agenda? Why wouldn't he?
Let's try to go back through what happened since the partnership between the Yemeni authorities and the Yemeni government with the US on al-Qaeda. Did they achieve anything? It is a big failure. Why is it a big failure? Because there is not an honest partner with the US administration in fighting al-Qaeda in Yemen. And maybe there is no real wish from the United States administration at that time to really fight al-Qaeda in Yemen.
So Sheikh Hamid, do you think then the new escalation of the military relationship between Washington and Sana'a will lead to destabilizing Yemen?
It is a disastrous thing on us here in Yemen. What happened since they started? Democracy is vanishing. The institutions of Yemen, the constitutional institutions, had been weakened and had been replaced by a police regime led or headed by the sons of the president to put more injustice in Yemen and to participate in the very unstable situation with poverty, with hate from the Yemeni people to this government, which is supported by the United States. I think that at the same time, there was a partnership, announced partnership between the Yemeni government and the US. At the same time, there was an unannounced alliance between the Yemeni government and al-Qaeda. I think the Yemeni government was more clever than the United States administration. They used them for a war against Yemenis, not against terror.
Sheikh al-Ahmar, do you think that is because after 32 years in power, President Ali Abdullah Saleh wants to stay yet more years in power, or perhaps allow for a succession to his family and to his children or nephew?
Both. He doesn't care about any other thing. He's not honest with Yemenis. How would he be honest with others? I tell you that Qaeda in Yemen in the present time might not be as dangerous as we may think if we really start bringing back stability to Yemen. If we have this partnership with the Yemeni society, they will be able. We don't have a very big roots for Qaeda in Yemen, even though Osama bin Laden is from Yemen, but he had never been to Yemen. We cannot blame Yemen because some people had been trained here. The attackers in the...
So Sheikh Ahmar, what do you think is the Yemeni solution to al-Qaeda then?
The Yemeni solution to al-Qaeda is a real stability, political stability, and this needs democracy. if democracy is implemented, if freedom is there, if media is free in Yemen, if poverty is going away from Yemenis, if justice is here, you will not hear Qaeda. Yemen is a nation of peace. We have been here in this part of the world since the beginning of history. We have participated positively in the culture of the humanity. We haven't been a threat to anybody since thousands of years. We are a nation of peace. And because of that partnership, Yemenis they were very keen in following up what happened in the last elections in the United States. The hope which Mr. Obama sent to his people in the United States, it was sent as well to us. He promised that he will not support any dictator in the world. He promised to close Guantanamo. We don't want him to close Guantanamo in Cuba and make another replacement for Guantanamo, a country like Yemen, with 23 million jailed in this Yemen. It is a big mistake. They should support stability in Yemen, and stability needs democracy.
Speaking of stability, now that Yemen is growing unstable, do you think that's going to overspill also to your neighbors in Saudi Arabia?
If we are unstable, yes, but why we are unstable? We had always been a very stable country, even in the absence of a real state meaning, because we have a very good tribal system. By the way, it is mistaken that tribes in Yemen, they are supporting al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda are few individuals hidden there and there. They are not supported by parties, they are not supported by tribes, they are not supported by influential real people here in Yemen. If they are supported by anybody, they are supported by the regime to be used to blackmail the United States.
Sheikh Ahmar, on this sobering note, thank you so much for joining Empire, and we wish you, of course, and Yemen prosperous and stable days to come. Professor Nafa, we go once again to the question of autocratic regimes. If you notice the sobering view he gave, Sheikh Ahmar, is that the situation in Yemen is as such, is that al-Qaeda is not the main problem. The main problem is what is made out of al-Qaeda in that country in terms of both President Saleh and Washington.
Yes, this is exactly the most stupid response to what is going on in Yemen. The American response to what is going on is really will not work. You will create another Taliban in Yemen, and you will create another failing state. And if you have a failing state in this very sensitive part of the world, it will be very dangerous to the region, as a matter of fact.
Well, you know what? Actually, I keep looking at the map, Dr. Nafa. So we have Somalia, and then we go up to Gaza, Israel, Palestine, and then we go up to Lebanon, onto Iraq, Iran, back down to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and now Yemen. The entire Arabian Peninsula, in fact, now is surrounded by a belt of instability and war.
This is the most sensitive part of the world. If you look to Somalia and in face of it, Yemen, it means that the control of all the oil, as a matter of fact, this is very dangerous.
So is this a self-defeating policy then? I don't understand. What is going on? Why then would America pursue such a policy when al-Qaeda remains and proliferates and there is such chaos? Is this the pagans of the new Middle East, as Secretary Rice called it?
There is an explanation, as a matter of fact. Maybe some will see the fingers of Israel, because Israel's strategy, the end strategy, the security, the absolute security for Israel is trying to make all this region failing states.
I can hear the echo of one of our viewers now talking about conspiracy theory.
This is conspiracy theory, but I am just telling you, this is what is going on exactly, but because you are creating more failing states. If the United States has advised the GCC, for example, the Gulf Cooperation Council, to more absorb Yemen, to put more money in
regional solution.
Regional solution, to really create development. Put only 5% of what has been spent in Iraq, for example. In Yemen, you could have done marvelously much better.
More investment
I think there's a series,
in societies?
Absolutely, yes, of course. I mean, in Yemen, as the report indicated, al-Qaeda is exploiting the situation of political vacuum, political chaos, the rife unemployment, poverty, high levels of social marginalization. Al-Qaeda is exploiting all these doors and entering into Yemen and propagating and expanding through these vehicles. Because the fact is that Al-Qaeda is a sick child of a sick reality. And we keep always running away to theology to try to bury our heads and not to see reality.
So it's not in Islam that we're going to find a problem where...
No, you'll always find pockets of extremism in any religion, and Islam is no exception. The trouble is that concrete policies turn extremism into terrorism. They have turned extremism. We keep talking about the madrasas and their role in the war on terror and radicalizing young men.
The Islamic schools, yes.
The Islamic schools, as if these madrasas were born yesterday, just before the war on terror. Madrasas have been here for centuries.
In fact, Islam has been there for 14 centuries.
Yes, yes.
And we haven't seen that sort of waves of suicide bombings and killings and so on.
And theology, we have to realize that also that we keep talking about theology. Theology also doesn't exist out of space and outside time. Theology, religion exists within a context. Within a healthy context, you get a healthy theology, healthy interpretations of religion prosper and flourish, and in sick contexts, in flawed and deformed contexts such as the one where the Arab world and the Muslim world finds itself today, produces a flawed, deformed theology. So we have to start with reality. We have to try to address the problems that enable Al-Qaeda to increase its recruiting ability, to expand and to increase its legitimacy.
Let's try to round up our discussion on this very particular point. We spoke about the empire's responsibility, the imperial responsibility, if you will, for instability and chaos in the region. What about the responsibility of those people in the region, the civil society, the political parties, the Islamist group, the seculars, the religious? What is it that they need to do now to make sure that this thing is minimized to the maximum?
First of all, try to overcome the sectarian problem, because I have noticed what is really behind the scene, what is really very dangerous, because everywhere you find the presence of the United States, you have a more sectarian problem.
Divisive divide and rule.
Exactly, but not only because of this, you just trigger the issue in Iraq, for example, when the United States tried to set the political process, the regime. They tried to make a sectarian regime, as a matter of fact, to make quotas for Shiite.
So we need to reduce sectarianism.
We need to reduce sectarianism. We need to really push for real institutional building, democracy, as a matter of fact, and the United States can help, but not through war.
I think there is a role to be played by Muslims and Arabs in counteracting, in trying to combat the terrorism of al-Qaeda. There is a need for the promotion of the culture of tolerance, of moderation, and this needs to be done. But at the end of the day, this is only half of the answer. Yes. The other half lies with the United States and its allies. The United States can't go on bombing and invading and raiding while at the same time demanding that Muslims clear its mess.
So now whatever is domestic has become global. Whatever
absolutely.
is internal has become external.
Of the inside and the outside have overlapped.
And Al-Qaeda is no longer just a regional problem.
Absolutely.
It's a global problem.
Absolutely. A global problem.
On that sober note, we're going to have to end. Hassan Nafa, Somer Ghanouchi, thank you so much for joining us, The Empire.
Yes, thank you very much.
Before I come back with my final thought, let's take a brief look at another Al-Qaeda, this time a town in northern Yemen. Stephen Cole reports.
Market day in Al-Qaeda Central. Local produce, freshly roasted chicken, and chattering groups of excited children. Here, the only armed man is a casual and carefree policeman chewing the local narcotic, cat. Because this is a town called Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda means the base, and the town lives up to its name, sitting at the crossroads of ancient trade routes more than 200 kilometers from Yemen's capital, Sana'a. Founded in the 16th century, today more than 70,000 people live in Al-Qaeda, and by Yemeni standards, life is good. In a country where water is in desperately short supply, the American government is supporting Al-Qaeda. paying for the ironically named Kennedy Memorial Water Project, providing residents with much needed water. So, is there any link between the two al-Qaedas? Well, a small one perhaps. This little boy, called Osama, named after his father's hero. But life in this al-Qaeda isn't that bad. Just ask the locals.
As you heard from my guests, the majority of Islamist groups, whether conservative or progressive, pacifist or militant, power-hungry or non-political, Sufists or Salafists, like most secular leftist or liberal Muslims, might oppose US domination, but they also reject al-Qaeda's methods and religious justifications. So why does Washington pursue costly military interventions and questionable alliances with autocratic leaders instead of supporting political and regional solutions, considering that al-Qaeda has long harmed more Arabs than it has Westerners, and that Washington's war on terror has weakened secular and democratic forces in the region and increased, not decreased, threats to America? Perhaps when you're a hammer, all problems look like nails. But surely the US is much more than a hyper-nationalist project carrying a big stick. Indeed, unlike all other regional and world powers, America claims a world vision based on universal values. That's why it should always remember that in asymmetrical warfare, when you fight a weaker enemy for too long, you become like them. And that's the way it goes. Write to me or follow my blog, Imperium, by logging onto aljazeera.net/English. Thank you for watching.